madness in its words. There's sickness in its breath. Beware the Drago, for its icy touch is death.
The Damned is a 2024 movie about a 19th century small remote Icelandic fishing village as they try to survive the winter when a boat appears off the coast and sends their community into turmoil. Now, I've mentioned this in the past, but I really like folk horror movies. There's something about using old stories or myths of the past as a foundation for a really good horror story. They just fit so well together, especially when you're talking about a story set back a ways. Now, I don't want to give off like a older movies or better kind of vibe, but there definitely is something to be said for removing technology in a story without having to bend over backwards and explain why there's no signal or the battery died on a phone or a car won't start. Also, the lighting in these types of movies really just add to an atmosphere that's already pretty creepy with these smaller, more intimate lighting schemas. I just feel period horror can feel more immersive sometimes. And maybe it's on a subconscious level, because you can't just go to an old farm or a cabin in the woods. Like, there's just another level of dedication from a filmmaking standpoint in general that I think doesn't just come across as, say, like added production value, but it also adds something more realistic subconsciously. Like, there's this tactile sense that you get when you watch movies like this. Anyway, all that said, this movie really fit into my wheelhouse. 19th century story about a small, and I mean small, group of fishermen, I think somewhere around 8 or so, along with the caretaker and the woman who runs the encampment after the previous leader, her husband, had tragically had an accident the year before. Now, it's winter, and this little group is batten down the hatches, as they do every year, but this year has been really tough, and food has been super scarce, even more so than usual. It's been so bad, they actually have to check the logs of previous years to compare it to in order to see if what they're experiencing is even worse than then. But still, they are optimistic, and they spend their nights drinking and enjoying each other's company, and then during the day they head out into the waters to see if they can get fish. Now, it's been several days since they've caught anything, and their supplies are getting shockingly low, and they hope their luck will soon turn around. Probably is no surprise to anyone who just listened to the first part of this video, but where this movie shines is its atmosphere. It creates such a great mood of a small tribe on the outskirts of civilization trying to make ends meet in a cold and dark place. It's an interesting story on its own, but then it kind of ratchets up the tension by adding this other pressure point of a ship that goes down off the coast. And soon a decision needs to be made. Do they try to save the people on the ship or not? Do they risk their lives to save other people, knowing full well that anyone they save will put further taxing on an already difficult situation when it comes to, like, food and shelter? It's a great question and adds a nice element to the story as the decision on what to do weighs differently with each person. Of course, this is where the horror element comes into play, where an ancient spirit begins haunting the group, and there is a tale of an old creature that comes out at times like these. Now, as more people in the encampment see this creature and start to succumb to the old stories, the group splinters and questions what to do. Visually, this movie is striking. I mean, you can feel the cold coming off the screen in this. The landscape is this desolate place on the coast of Iceland, or off the coast of Iceland. I'm not really sure exactly if this is an island or what, but the production design here is just amazing. It does a great job of sticking with the time period and the feel of a small group on the edge of the world. Like, everything just feels real and lived in. Costumes are threadbare and layered, lighting is dim and intimate, and that's not even talking about the acting, which deserves a lot of praise here, as the performances are quite good. Now, the main players themselves do an excellent job here specifically, and there's a lot going on under the surface, and each actor is able to bring across a certain amount of depth to their role beyond whatever it is they're speaking, and that's some nice nuance there. Now, of course, some of the tertiary players are maybe a little stereotypy, but in a story like this, that does tend to happen. But the main players do an excellent job here. Now, one of the problems I had with this movie towards the end was some of the story choices that they made I didn't necessarily love, but I can't really talk about that at all without getting into a tiny spoiler section. So I'm going to do that here. If you want to skip ahead, you can go to the summation at the end. It's a little hard to kind of talk about the horror aspect of this movie without this kind of spoiler section. So the story is interesting, and they really ride that line of, is it horror or is it not? I mean, I guess, to be fair, it is horror no matter what because of how it's presented, but I guess the line they're riding on is more, is this supernatural or not? Now, I probably would have preferred just going ahead and fully embracing the horror and supernatural, but they felt the need to really kind of skate along the edge of whether this is actually happening, which to me is a shortcoming. The fact that they didn't make it clear it was supernatural kind of gave away the game without giving away the game, if that makes a lot of sense. And I would have preferred them just charging headfirst into it as opposed to kind of playing these, I don't know, these games of sorts as to whether or not it was real. But just to sum up, it is a solid, well-made film that has a lot going for it. The visuals and the place, the dialogue, the acting all present a captivating story with some moral questions and dilemmas attached. Now, I didn't love the direction that they went in the end. It's not really a twist by any means, but it felt like they tried to get a bit too cute or clever with it for my taste, and that there was maybe a few too many jump scares in the film that I probably could have done without. But those were the only real things that were a negative to me. Otherwise, I would give this movie a B+. But let me know what you think.